I thought my grandmother was protecting me, but I was wrong. Manipulation, and a secret that destroyed my family, haunted me for years. From human trafficking scars to stolen inheritance, I faced panic attacks, nightmares, and public shame until the day I confronted her in church. This is my story of survival, trust broken, and reclaiming my life. I was standing in the church hall, the smell of old wood polish and candle wax thick in the air, when my grandmother Katherine looked me straight in the eye and said, "You were never part of this family." The room fell silent. A few cousins froze mid-step. Someone's baby started crying. I remember gripping the edge of the pew to keep from collapsing. It was a Sunday morning, 10:14 a.m., March 3rd, exactly 1 year after I'd escaped. That sentence, that final cut, was the moment everything snapped. But it didn't start there. It started long before, when I still thought Katherine was my protector. Back then, I believed she was saving me from the world. She paid the mortgage on her house with $156,000 left on it and told everyone she was taking care of her poor traumatized grandson. I used to sit in her kitchen on weekend mornings, sipping cheap chocolate protein shakes because she said they were healthier than real meals, while she smoked her third cigarette by 8 a.m. The smell clung to her floral robe and to the curtains. It's still the scent that brings back nightmares. She told me I was lucky she took me in after the accident. The accident that left me with the limp, the scars, and the fractured memory I'd spent years trying to piece together in therapy. The accident that killed my brother. But what I didn't know then, and what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that she caused it. When I first moved in with her, I thought the world was giving me a second chance. I was 17, fresh out of a group home, trying to rebuild after escaping a human trafficking ring. My body was covered in scars and cigarette burns. My mind was worse. I couldn't sleep through the night. Every sound felt like danger. I jumped at the click of a lighter. I was just trying to survive. Katherine called it tough love. She'd say, "Gabriel, you need structure if you ever want to function again." And I believed her. At 7:00 a.m., every morning she'd knock on my door, slide a protein shake across the floor, and say, "Drink this, then shower." I wasn't allowed to leave the house until noon. No friends, no social media. She said it was for my safety, that the people who hurt me before might find me again. For months, I accepted it. I thought she was protecting me. Then came Matthew, my cousin, 25 at the time, the only person in that family who ever really saw me. He'd stop by sometimes, bringing donuts or leftover takeout. The first time I saw him again, I nearly cried. His hug was warm and normal, the kind that doesn't make you flinch. He whispered, "You look better, Gabe, stronger." But I wasn't. I was just quieter. Numb. After therapy months later, I learned to recognize what was happening. The isolation, the dependency, the constant gaslighting. Back then, I couldn't name it. I thought I was the problem. Katherine controlled everything, even my memories. She'd say things like, "You don't remember it right, sweetheart. The police said you were confused after the crash." But sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself sitting on the cold kitchen tile, staring at the shoebox under the sink. It was full of old letters from my mom, from my brother, from people I hadn't seen since before the accident. The handwriting looked shaky, smeared with tears and time. I'd trace my brother's name with my fingertip and whisper, "I'm sorry." The first red flag came when I found a bill in her mail, a hospital invoice with my name on it and a date I didn't recognize. She snatched it from me before I could read the whole thing and said, "That's private, Gabriel. Don't go through my things." That night, I had my first panic attack since the escape. My chest locked up, hands trembling, eyes darting around the room for exits. I tried to remind myself I wasn't back there, but the walls felt too close, the air too thick with smoke. And then, that weekend morning, she said it again. "You were never part of this family." It wasn't anger in her voice. It was satisfaction. Like she'd finally said what she'd been holding back for years. Matthew was standing behind her, jaw tight. I could see something in his eyes, of guilt, maybe fear. Later, I'd understand why. Because the next part of the truth about what Katherine did, about what she made Matthew do, would destroy everything I thought I knew about family. After that Sunday, I couldn't unhear her words. "You were never part of this family." They echoed every time the house got quiet, between the hum of the refrigerator and the faint scratching of the wind against the windows. Matthew started visiting more often after that. I think he was trying to check on me without making Katherine suspicious. One Saturday morning, I found him in the kitchen pretending to fix a leaking faucet. Katherine was out on the porch, cigarette dangling between her fingers, gossiping on the phone. He looked up and whispered, "Gabe, you okay? You look like you haven't slept in a week." He was right. I hadn't. The nightmares were back. Not just of the trafficking house, the locked basement, the sound of footsteps above me, but of the car crash. In those dreams, I could see Katherine's car, headlights blinding, brakes screeching, and my brother's scream cutting through the air. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding so hard I thought it would tear through my ribs. I tried to tell my therapist about it, Dr. Landon, during one of our Thursday afternoon sessions. "It's like I'm remembering things I'm not supposed to," I said, twisting the hem of my sleeve between my fingers. He nodded, taking notes. "Memory after trauma can be unreliable. Gabriel, you should trust Katherine. She's your legal guardian, right?" The way he said it made my stomach turn. I didn't know then that those notes, every fear, every confession, were being shared with her. I didn't know my therapist was reporting back to my abuser. The first time I caught him in a lie, it was small. I mentioned something to Katherine that I'd only told Dr. Landon about the shoebox of letters. Her face went white. "You shouldn't be digging through old things," she said sharply. "It's unhealthy to dwell on the past." "How did you know about that?" I asked. She smiled tightly. "You told me, remember?" But I hadn't. That night, I hid the shoebox under a loose floorboard in my room. Inside were letters from my mum written before she disappeared, in warm handwriting, ink smudged with tears, talking about how she feared for Gabriel's safety. One note said, "If anything happens to me, don't trust Katherine." That line haunted me. I didn't know what it meant, but something inside me cracked open. After therapy, I started noticing things differently, the way Katherine's tone changed when people were around, how she turned soft and sweet for the neighbours, calling me my brave boy. But when the door closed, her voice sharpened. "You'll never survive on your own. You're damaged goods, Gabriel." Sometimes, when she'd step outside to smoke, I'd press my ear to the phone receiver she left on the counter. I caught her talking to someone in a man's voice. He mentioned money. "We can't afford to lose the payments," he said. "Payments? For what?" The next day, I followed her to the mailbox. She was holding a check, laughing to herself. I caught a glimpse before she tucked it into her purse. It was from a victims rehabilitation fund in my name. $4,500. My stomach dropped. She'd been collecting money for me and keeping it. When I confronted her that night, my voice shook. "Why are you getting checks in my name?" She slammed her coffee mug on the counter. "You think you understand anything about survival? That money is for this house, Gabriel. Do you know what the mortgage is? $156,000. You think I'm doing this for fun?" Her face twisted with rage. "You'd be dead if it weren't for me." That was the first time she hit me. Just one slap, hard and sharp across the cheek. But it felt like a lifetime collapsing in a single second. After therapy, I'd later learned about trauma conditioning, how abusers make you believe you deserve the pain. That night, I believed it. I told myself I must have provoked her. I sat on my bed, pressing a cold towel to my face, whispering apologies into the dark. Matthew noticed the bruise the next day. "What happened?" he whispered as we stood outside by his car, cigarette smoke drifting between us. I lied. I fell. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. Instead, he handed me a folded note. "If things get bad, call this number," he said. "Don't ask questions, just trust me. It is a hotline number 1 for trafficking survivors." My chest tightened. That night, I tucked it into the shoebox with the letters. It felt like holding a lifeline I wasn't brave enough to use yet. What I didn't know was that the next time I opened that box, it would contain something that would destroy what little trust I had left and prove that Katherine wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. It all came crashing down one rainy Tuesday, October 15th at 6:43 p.m. I was digging through the shoebox again, the one under the floorboard, lined with letters and crumpled receipts, when I found a bundle of hospital records I had never seen. My hands shook so badly I had to press them against the wet tile of my room to steady myself. The first document was a police report, my brother's car accident. But then there was a note in Katherine's handwriting, "Adjust speed, ensure he can't reach the wheel." My stomach sank. My brother had died because she planned it. Because she wanted control. And the accident that left me scarred wasn't random. I couldn't breathe. My head spun, vision narrowing. Panic attacked like a predator. I threw up my protein shake across the floor, the bit of powder clinging to the tiles. Every thought raced. Every memory from the last 2 years, carefully manipulated by Katherine, replayed like a nightmare. After therapy, I'd learned the name for what I felt. Hypervigilance. Trust issues. Panic attacks. Nightmares. And now, real evidence that the person who said she protected me had orchestrated my family's destruction. I grabbed my phone and dialed Matthew. He picked up on the first ring, his voice low. "Gabe, what happened?" It's Katherine." I choked. "She did it. She, my brother, the accident." There was silence. "Then, meet me at the park, now." We met under the flickering streetlights. Matthew's coat smelled like cigarette smoke, even though he insisted he didn't smoke. "Had I tried to stop her," he said quietly. "The letters, the money, I couldn't. She's got everyone, the therapists, the church, the neighbours, all twisted." I froze. My therapist. Reporting back to Katherine. My safe space had been a trap. My panic attacks and trauma symptoms, meticulously documented, handed to my abuser. Matthew handed me a file. It contained photos, letters, and records. I flipped through, realizing the abuse was worse than I could imagine. It wasn't just me. My sibling, my cousin, even Matthew had been coerced into silence. I felt my body go numb. My jaw locked. The social fallout had been orchestrated. The church congregation that once welcomed our family turned their backs. Whispers followed me at the store. People looked through me, as if my existence had been erased. Even strangers recalled when I shared my story. The humiliation was public, constant. My reputation, my trust in the world, destroyed. Matthew explained slowly. "She told them all you were unstable, dangerous. She made it seem like you were lying about everything, the accident, the abuse, the trafficking. That's why no one came to help." I thought of the bruises, the isolation, the protein shakes replacing meals, the smoke clinging to her clothes, the weekend morning spent trapped in her house. I remembered therapy sessions where I cried and begged for help, only for those words to reach her. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. Instead, I sat in Matthew's car, shivering, letting the rain wash over my face. My chest felt tight, broken. Trust shattered. Trauma rewired my brain. I had been trained to believe that the world was unsafe, that the people who said they loved me were my enemies. Then came another revelation. Katherine had manipulated legal documents. The $156,000 mortgage was in her name, but it was my inheritance she had siphoned, claiming it was for my care. She had stolen my financial security, just as she had stolen my family. I felt betrayed on every possible level. My therapist, my family, even my own mind, all manipulated. My best friend from before, Jamie, had helped me escape years ago, but even he hadn't known the depth. The betrayal was everywhere, like poison in my veins. I realized I had two choices: collapse entirely or fight. I chose fight. I called Jamie, voice shaking. I need your help. I can't do this alone. By the next week, I had gathered everything: hospital records, letters, financial documents. Matthew stayed close, protective. We were both scared. But for the first time in years, I felt a spark of agency. And that's when I found the letter about my sibling and my cousin, Katherine's secret victim. The handwriting was faint, trembling. The letter described years of psychological torment, emotional manipulation, and even physical abuse. My blood ran cold. Katherine hadn't just destroyed my life. She had a pattern. She had created a legacy of trauma that spanned decades. It wasn't just betrayal. It was systemic. I felt my knees hit the pavement. Tears ran freely. Nightmares surged back, but now with clarity, the emotional scars from before were magnified by knowledge, by proof. Every therapy session, every panic attack, every sleepless night made sense now. I wasn't broken because I was weak. I was broken because she had willed it. The social world we had known of the congregation, the neighbours, even friends, all complicit in her gaslighting. I realised the fight wasn't just against Katherine. It was against years of lies, manipulation, and systemic abuse. Matthew held my shoulder, steadying me. We exposed her. We showed the world the truth. I nodded. My throat was raw, but my mind focused. The nightmare wasn't over. But for the first time, I had a map out. It was Sunday, November 11th, 9:07 a.m., at St. Muck's Church, at the same place Katherine had orchestrated my public humiliation a year earlier. The smell of candle wax mixed with wet coats from the early rain outside. People shuffled inside, murmuring greetings, unaware of the storm about to hit. I could feel my pulse hammering as I stepped through the doorway. Matthew was behind me, his hand brushing against mine in silent solidarity. My body trembled, every nerve screaming panic. The old fear, the one Katherine had drilled into me, clawed at my chest. I remembered the nightmares, the therapy sessions, the panic attacks, and I swallowed hard. I'm not the scared boy anymore. She sat in the front pew, hair perfectly styled, floral scarf wrapped around her neck, a cigarette tucked into her purse. When her eyes met mine, I saw it, that same cold satisfaction from before, the twisted pride in ruining my life. I approached slowly, my she-wolf's evidence clutched under my arm. I set it on the pew between us. The letters, financial records, and hospital notes were all there. I took a deep breath, tasting the bitter protein shake I'd gulped down earlier, as if it fueled my courage. "Katherine," I said, voice shaking but loud enough for the first few rows of the congregation to hear. "We need to talk, about everything." She smiled, the kind of smile meant to disarm. "Gabriel, this isn't the time. Sit down in it." "No," I interrupted. "It's the only time. I know what you did. I know about the accident. I know how you manipulated my therapist. I know about the money, about the letters, about my sibling." Gasps rippled through the church. Heads turned. Whispers grew into murmurs. A woman near the back whispered, "But oh my God, was that true?" Katherine's face turned red, but her voice remained unnervingly calm. "Gabriel, you don't understand. I did everything for you. I kept you safe. You destroyed me," I shouted. "You isolated me, humiliated me, and stole my life. Do you know how many panic attacks I've had? How many nights I woke up screaming because of you?" A hand went to cover her mouth as she finally realized the depth of exposure. My cousin Matthew stepped forward. "She's been lying to all of us, manipulating everyone. It's time she faced the truth." I opened the shoebox, pulling out the letters and hospital records, letting the pages scatter slightly on the polished floor. "Here," I said, voice cracking with rage and grief. "Proof. Every lie you told, every manipulation, every betrayal." The church was silent except for the soft rustling of paper. Whispers became audible. "Is that Katherine? I can't believe it all these years." Her composure broke. She lunged, voice trembling. "You regret this." Matthew caught her arm. "No more Katherine, not here, not ever again." I felt a strange clarity as she tried to storm out. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking from her. I stood firm, watching the woman who had orchestrated my trauma flail in the centre of the sanctuary. And then came the final revelation. I looked at my sibling, who had arrived quietly, sitting in the back. Tears streaked their face. "She did the same to me," they whispered. My stomach twisted. My anger turned molten. The pattern was clear. It wasn't just me, it was a calculated cycle of abuse spanning decades. By the time the pastor approached, Confused and horrified, the congregation had split into factions. Some glared at Katherine, some whispered to each other about the betrayals. The credibility evaporated instantly. People who once welcomed her into their homes recoiled, some even stepping outside to make calls. I felt the adrenaline leave my body in waves. My chest, still tight, began to ease. The nightmares hadn't ended, the trauma hadn't vanished, but for the first time, my voice and my truth had pierced the lies. Whispers followed us out of the church. Social fallout was immediate. Family members avoided her. Neighbours stared openly. News of the confrontation spread quickly, forcing Katherine into hiding. I looked at Matthew and my sibling, their hands gripping mine. "We survived her," I said. "Together." In that moment, I realised confrontation wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming life, truth, and dignity. Every therapy session, every panic attack, every sleepless night had led me here. And now she couldn't erase me anymore. The first step was over. Expose her. The next would be rebuilding and reclaiming what she had stolen and learning to live without the shadow of face she had cast over me for so long. The aftermath hit me harder than I ever imagined. November 12th, 8:02 a.m. I sat alone in my small apartment, the shoebox of letters and documents on the kitchen table. The rain was still falling outside, a soft but relentless drum on the roof. I had expected relief after the church confrontation, but instead, I felt hollow. My body was tense, muscles knotted from the adrenaline of the previous day. My chest ached from shallow breathing. Panic attacks returned with a vengeance and not the occasional night terror, but full-blown episodes where I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold a cup of water. The social fallout was immediate. News of Katherine's exposure had spread throughout our town. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down aisles. The mother clutched her child's hand and pulled him close. At work, colleagues avoided eye contact, murmuring in hushed tones about the Gabriel incident. Even Matthew couldn't shield me from the judgmental stares of strangers who didn't know the truth but assumed the worst. I tried therapy again, desperate to process the unraveling of my life. But the sessions were painful. Dr. Landon had been replaced, and the new therapist, harshly supportive, had to guide me through the realization that my trust had been violated on every possible level, by family, by a therapist, by the people I once counted on. We worked through the hypervigilance, the nightmares, the intrusive memories, and the gnawing self-doubt. Every session was exhausting. I often left crying, sometimes vomiting from the stress of reliving trauma, sometimes shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't sleep alone. Even in my own apartment, I'd wake to every creak of the building, every distant siren, imagining Katherine's presence. At night, I would clutch the shoebox to my chest, tracing the letters with trembling fingers, trying to hold onto the pieces of my broken family that weren't tinted by her manipulation. Financially, the revelation hit hard too. Katherine's manipulation of the $156,000 mortgage and siphoning of my inheritance meant that I had no safety net. Bills piled up. I lived frugally, skipping meals or surviving on protein shakes because I had no extra money for groceries. The same shakes that once symbolized care now felt like a bitter reminder of her control. I spiraled into isolation. Friends I had confided in gradually distanced themselves, unsure how to navigate the chaos. The church, once a community, had turned its back completely. I felt cut off from every corner of normal life, as though my world had shrunk to the size of my apartment and the walls I couldn't escape. One night, I broke. Sitting on the floor, surrounded by letters, documents, and scattered receipts, I sobbed uncontrollably. My siblings slept in the next room, too afraid to intervene. Matthew had gone home after staying for a few nights, exhausted from helping me manage the legal and social fallout. I felt utterly alone. "I can't do this," I whispered to the walls. "I can't breathe, I can't trust anyone." But even in that darkness, a small flicker of determination remained. I couldn't erase the trauma, couldn't undo what Katherine had done, but I could start reclaiming control. I started journaling, cataloguing every piece of evidence, every memory, every emotion. Therapy became a lifeline. We worked on grounding techniques, on retraining my mind to recognize that not everyone was an enemy. Every deep breath, every step outside, every small interaction without panic was a victory. It was slow, painful, devastating. I relived betrayal after betrayal, uncovering the depths of Katherine's manipulation, the abuse of my sibling, the reports from my former therapist, the financial exploitation. I was at rock bottom, a person reduced to trembling, hyper-aware instincts haunted by the past. But I survived. That became my mantra: I survived. I survived. I survived. Even in that rock-bottom state, I started imagining a future beyond fear, a life where I could help others survive the same trauma, where the cycle of abuse could be broken. It would take years. It would take therapy, patience, and rebuilding trust in myself and the world. But for the first time, I dared to believe that recovery was possible. Recovery didn't come quickly. It came in small, uneven steps, each one a battle against the years of trauma Katherine had inflicted. After months of intensive therapy, I started to learn what it meant to trust myself again. My therapist taught me grounding exercises for panic attacks, naming 5 things I could see, 4 I could touch, 3 I could hear. At first, I couldn't even get past step 1 without trembling. But slowly, the exercises worked. I also began processing the nightmares that had haunted me since the trafficking and the accident. I wrote down every detail in a notebook, one page at a time, until the memories lost some of their power. Some nights I would wake shaking anyway, but I learned to breathe through it to remind myself I am safe. I am here. I survived. Financial stability came slowly too. I filed legal action to reclaim the inheritance Katherine had siphoned and the funds she had manipulated. The process was exhausting, but Matthew and my siblings stood by me. Each successful step, reclaiming a bank account, paying off a fraction of the $156,000 mortgage she had manipulated, felt like a brick in rebuilding my life. Socially, I started rebuilding too. Jamie, my loyal best friend who had helped me escape years ago, was my anchor. He introduced me to support groups for trauma survivors. The first meetings were terrifying. I felt like everyone could see my failures and scars. But hearing others share similar experiences, human trafficking, family betrayal, financial exploitation, helped me feel less alone. Slowly, I made new friends, people who weren't complicit in Katherine's manipulation. I returned to school, unsure if I could even focus, but determined to find a purpose in my pain. Psychology called to me. The idea that I could help others survive trauma, rebuild trust, and reclaim their lives gave me a sense of agency I hadn't felt in years. I started as a volunteer at a local counselling centre, observing sessions, helping with intake forms, and learning how to guide survivors with patience and empathy. Every story reminded me of my own, the isolation, the betrayal, the slow climb from rock bottom. One evening, after a long day at school and a therapy session, I opened the shoebox of letters one last time. I had gone through each one, documented everything, and made peace with the evidence. Some letters were kept as reminders of what I survived, of what I overcame. Others I burned ceremoniously in my backyard, letting the smoke carry the weight of the past away. I still have nightmares. Sometimes the smell of cigarette smoke, the bitter taste of a protein shake, or the flash of a memory from that weekend morning triggers them. But I've learned to respond differently, grounding myself, calling a therapist, reaching out to friends. I've reclaimed my body, my mind, my agency. Now, as a trained counsellor, I sit with survivors every day, helping them navigate the wreckage Katherine and people like her leave behind. I teach grounding techniques, coping strategies, and the critical lesson I had to learn the hard way: trust can be rebuilt, and survival is proof of strength. I also maintain a small ritual. Once a year, I write a letter to the younger version of myself with a skid, beaten boy, and read it aloud in my apartment. I tell him, "You are brave, you are worthy, you are alive, and one day, you'll help others alive too." The confrontation at St. Mark's Church, the public shame, the betrayal, the panic attacks, the social isolation, all of it shaped me. I wouldn't pretend it didn't leave scars. But it also gave me empathy, clarity, and a mission. I've gone back to school, earned my degree, and now help others navigate trauma that once trapped me. Matthew and my sibling are part of my life, my support system, and together, we've begun to redefine what a family really means. I still think of Katherine sometimes, her words echoing faintly, but the voice that now dominates is my own, steady, empowered, unafraid. I survived her. I survived my past. And now I help others do the same. For the first time in my life, the future feels like something I own, not something controlled or stolen.